love you guys, and I also want to wring your neck. So medically, one could declare him a psychopath.
That psycho, Lauren D. Laguna, does that all the time.
I want to create a place where people are like, oh, wow, Lauren is the place I could go to express my idea. That is difficult, where I might be shut down in other places. I want a free speech channel.
It is Lauren D. Laguna. I fucking knew it.
Hello, how are you, Mark? How are you? It's so nice to have you as a guest today on Lauren De Laguna. How's your day going?
My day's going well, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm interested to go through this. Sounds fun.
So, for those of you watching, let me tell you about Mark Clay McGowan. So, you are what was the term for it? You went around in your car. You looked at train tracks and you ensured that they were safe and you fixed them. What would you call that position?
I was in the signal department. We were responsible for the signal systems the trains run on, the crossing gates, where road crossings are, wayside detectors. And I was spent about a third of my career in construction, building all that stuff, and the rest of it in maintenance, maintaining, testing, and repairing it.
And what do you do now?
Make YouTube videos. I
and
retired.
You have a YouTube show.
Yeah, I retired
in
in October 2019.
And you do a YouTube show about all of this type of content and trains and stuff and railways, and it has blown up.
Yeah, it's done really well. People like carnage and my derailment videos, and when there's problems, those do really well and attract a lot of attention, a lot of viewers, and a lot of subscribers.
So, can you tell me about some of the hardest difficulties you had on your job? Do you have any story in which you had a near collision or near incident or anything like that?
The only thing I was really ever involved in that was like that, I was a gang foreman in construction. And we were working at a location out in the desert, getting ready. We were doing a survey of the location. We were getting ready to do a job there. And I was off looking inside one of the signal cases, and a guy came, the high rail vehicles that ride on the tracks that track inspectors drive, the pickups came through, and that guy was on cruise control doing his paperwork, and two of my guys were standing on the tracks, and I hadn't posted a lookout, and that was my fault. And they were struck by the high rail vehicle, and they both, excuse me, they both survived, but were both permanently disabled. They actually, one of them lost one of his legs below the knee, and the other one just suffered injuries that kept him from coming back to work. And I say permanently disabled, they were perfectly fine to go running around stuff. They just couldn't work anymore. And so,
oh wow,
that was a big deal. And but other than that, I always tell people, like derailments and stuff. I worked for the railroad for 40 years on the ground, and in that time, I never saw a derailment happen. I've literally lost count of the number of derailments that I have worked on. But as far as, just like that one, I have never seen one happen. I've never seen a collision or anything, even though I've worked those as well.
But there's a lot, right? So when this Ohio train incident happened, people were looking into, well, how often do rail crashes happen? Isn't it 3 train crashes in America per day on average?
The derailments are very, very common, and they always have been. I'm not a cheerleader for what they call precision schedule railroading, which is the modern business model for most major railroads. And people want to blame everything that happens on PSR, but these derailments, like I said, I've lost count of how many I've worked, and they've been going on. And when you go in and start looking up the data and the numbers for derailments, that's every derailment that's reported to the Federal Railroad Administration. And that's minor derailments in yards. Anytime it just has to do virtually no damage, no cars tipped over or anything, but it gets reported as a derailment. So big major derailments like this one here aren't as common, but they are still relatively common. We only hear about like the one in Ohio because of the environmental issues and the chemicals and all that. If that would have just been like this, a bunch of empty cars, it's unlikely we would have even heard about it.
So, okay. Well, with the Ohio one, it had like all of these gases just in the train. Is that normal to have not like a second sheath or like having the gas in separate containers within the train, or do they usually just pump the train? I guess I'm really confused on a lot of aspects of trains. Have you seen Handmaid's Tale? That dumb show on Hulu?
No, I haven't.
Okay. There's an episode where the girls jump into the train and they land in just like a vat of milk. And I was like, what? Is that how it works? Do trains just, that's not how it works, right?
No. I don't know exactly when they started building the double hull cars, but if you look right there, see those two cars way down there?
Pause that, Henry. Pause it. Yeah.
Those cars are the only two cars that involved in that derailment that weren't empty, and those are loaded with mineral oil. And they rolled all the way down. So I don't know, it's probably 150 feet down to the bottom. They rolled all the way down the hill and didn't even spring a leak. These are the newer double hull cars. I don't know. I'm not conversant with the dates and also, so I don't know when they started using these double hull cars. But even in like what happened in Ohio, I don't know if those were double hull cars or not. But from what, and I can only speak on what I've read about this stuff. People asked me questions about it, and I did some research into it. Not a deep dive, but the vinyl chloride was undergoing a polymerization effect within the cars, and it was going to cause a very high possibility of it causing an explosion.
Why didn't they know about this? They must have been shipping these types of materials prior to this. Why wouldn't they know?
Trains are loaded with all kinds of different stuff, and that's what the placards on the sides of the car are for. So those can be identified as the placards are usually groups. You know, you might have different types of oils that all fall within the same group of a placard, but they would be responded to in the same manner. And the manifests of the trains, if they can't see the placards or if the cars aren't marked, then they can get hold of the railroads immediately and get the manifest for those trains and find out what is on the. And as far as Ohio goes, I don't know how that went down. I'm not privy to that kind of information.
When trains are carrying, okay, first of all, trains that ship materials, do they tend to use like a federal railway, right? Or does the company
railways in America are all privately owned. There are no government railways in the United States other than transit systems and metros and stuff like that. But as far as the freight railroads in America, they're all privately owned.
So, okay, if they're all privately owned, so some private company owns the railroad itself, and then
yes,
other private companies contract with them to put their trains on that railroad, right?
Generally, especially now that there have been so many mergers that we have so few companies, but generally the railroad, I'll just tell you what happens around here. Union Pacific has its line that goes up the valley, the San Joaquin Valley, from Bakersfield to the Bay Area and up there. And Burlington Northern Santa Fe has a parallel line. They run pretty much next to each other, about 10 miles apart at places, but 10, 15 miles apart. But they go the same direction in the same ways, and they don't use each other's lines unless there is some very unusual reason for that to happen. Then from Bakersfield to Mojave, Union Pacific owns that line, but there's no other way to get over the mountains down here. So Burlington Northern Santa Fe has what's called trackage rights to run on Union Pacific's road from here to Mojave. And then Mojave, BNSF splits out to Barstow, and Union Pacific goes out through the desert and down to West Colton. So railroads do use each other's lines sometimes, but generally and typically the owning railroad is the only one that runs trains on their own lines.
So I guess what I'm asking though is, if I were to own dangerous chemicals and I wanted
so
to
you're talking about being a shipper,
right? Okay, so there's a person who is in charge of shipping it. There's the person who owns the product and is trying to sell it. And then there's the owner of the rail. I'm trying to figure out who is responsible. When there's a train crash and it has all these hazardous materials and it hurts the
railroad's responsible.
The road itself, not the train, not the conductor, not the owner of the suppliers.
In the case of the Ohio deal, that was a Norfolk Southern track and a Norfolk Southern train, and they are going to be responsible. There's a lot of misinformation, and I am no expert on the way law works and all that, but I have been involved in some major derailments where major damage was done, and the railroads were responsible for all of that. It's the big derailment down in Riverside, California in 1989 that killed the 2 crewmen, a few people on the ground, and then later on had a ruptured gas line as a result of that killed more people. While that ruptured gas line ended up not being on Southern Pacific, but Southern Pacific, that they were always on the verge of bankruptcy anyway, but that derailment almost sunk them financially for all the money they put out. But the railroad, Norfolk Southern, is going to pay for this. And you hear I'm not trying to get political, but you'll hear I'm
political. Go ahead. Speak your mind.
You hear the talking heads on the news saying, we're going to make Norfolk Southern pay for this. Norfolk Southern's going to pay for it anyway. When you hear people talk about, well, the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for this, that's only where the federal agencies get involved. And they will get involved in that, whether they're working at that derailment or working the FAA working an airplane crash. We foot those bills anyway as taxpayers. It's terrible that happened. Derailments are never a good thing, but yeah, Norfolk Southern's going to pay for this, going to pay out the nose for it. And again, I'm not an expert on how things work backstage, but the government may have, I don't know, maybe they hold hands somehow and somebody gets some kind of federal relief, but I wouldn't think so. But that's just
how large. Do you know how large Norfolk is as a company and if they'll be able to afford this lawsuit?
Yeah, they'll be able to afford it. It's not good. I mean, it's not going to help their bottom line, but the railroads know how to make money. If they didn't, our freeways would be stuffed with trucks. But railroads know how to make money. They know how to transport things efficiently and, for the most part, safely.
So is Norfolk the one who makes the train itself and decides this should be a double-barreled, the double-barreled tank like you were talking about earlier? Or is it who decides which train actually goes on the track to hold the hazardous materials?
That I don't know. I really don't know. As far as I know, the shipper says we have some stuff that we want to ship, and the railroad decides, if they're going to use an older car, a newer car. And there again, not being an expert where that kind of stuff is concerned, I don't know what the guidelines are as far as what you can ship in an older single hull car as opposed to one of the new ones. I don't know.
That's really interesting because I do know that you have something called strict liability with hazardous materials. So if there's any injury whatsoever due to the hazardous materials, you're 100% liable. even if you can't show like a specific person's fault. But it would be interesting if like the company who owned the hazardous materials, if they chose the train and they chose a train that was not very safe, then it seems odd to blame the railways. But if the railway train chooses
Yeah, I
the
don't.
train,
I don't think the shipper is that involved in. They just want to get their stuff moved around, and maybe there may be regulations for shippers that they have to use this car or that. And if that's the case, I'm sure that they were using the correctly regulated car. It wouldn't make sense for a shipper, knowing they were required to use a specific type of a car to ship with, for them to use something else. But I don't know. Just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean they won't do it.
all right.
I've done a lot of things in my life that didn't make any sense.
So, okay, I actually have I kind of want to move topics a little bit. I want to talk about how train tracks get so nasty. And I'm going to have Henry, the producer, pull up a video that we were discussing earlier. It's on Twitter. You know what I'm talking about, Henry. And he was going to show a video of a train that's on this track. And it's such a nasty, rickety track. And I want to know, how did the track get like that? And then how do you fix it without, when you have all of these trains coming every day? How do you, I don't know. Yeah, let's watch this. Have you seen this video?
That's not a main line. That I don't know where that is, and I don't know if telephoto compression has anything to do with why it looks like that. But
you could kind of watch the train move on it, and you could see that the train is like struggling to stay on the track.
I've seen some branch lines that were in pretty bad shape, but I've never seen anything like that. Like I said, I don't know where that is. I don't recognize the markings on the locomotive.
It's supposed to be Ohio, Idaho, according to the video title.
Okay, but yeah, I've never seen anything that bad. But that's not a main line. That may be a track that only gets used once a month. Who knows? I mean, there's no context there with it, so I don't know. It's like the branch lines around Bakersfield. They're mostly 10 mile an hour is the maximum speed they can travel on that. And
the engineer is in the train controlling the speed, or is there an operator off the train that controls?
They do have remote control operations, but those are generally in yards. Out on a line like that, you would have someone actually operating the train.
And you could speed on the train. And what happens if you speed? Do you get like a speeding ticket? And
especially today with even on branch lines. I don't know how it works with small short lines if they have GPS. I know that the San Joaquin Valley Railroad around here has it on their trains, but they know when you're speeding and when you're not. And yeah, you will definitely. It's not like the old days where you're behind, you need to go fast and catch up. They don't do that. They have speed limits that they abide by. And on main lines, they have the positive train control systems on all the they're not on all main lines. It depends on the tonnage. There are different parameters. That's not the word I'm looking for, but if they run under a certain tonnage a year, they don't have to have PTC. But most of the main lines in America, and again, I don't know about the one in Ohio, and nothing about the Norfolk Southern other than what their locomotives look like. I don't know if that was, I think it was under PTC, if I remember correctly, but that system won't allow you to speed. It gives you about a 3 or 4 mile an hour leeway, and then it'll start slowing the train down automatically.
Interesting. How quickly would you be able to stop? Obviously, it depends on how fast you're going, but if there was something in the way of the train, would a conductor be able to prevent a crash in time? How far would they have to see ahead?
Well, as you said, it depends on the the speed and the weight of the train. Shorter, lighter trains can come to a controlled stop. Not quickly. You can't stop a train quickly, even if it's just a locomotive. You can't stop them quickly. They're just too big. They have what's
Then
called.
what's the point? What's the point of having a driver in the first place? Why not just have everything automatic and on a set speed? Because
No,
if you can't stop it anyway,
that would be incredibly dangerous. You need to have someone. You need to have someone in the cab, preferably at least two people in the cab of the locomotive, paying attention to what the train is doing. These engineers and conductors are highly trained and very capable, and it's like pilots in airplanes say, they can feel what's going on. And I've ridden in the locomotive cabs before, and I don't feel any much difference between this and that, but they do, and they will make comments. These guys know what they're doing, and we need those people on those cabs. You can stop the train, but they have what's called emergency, where they just plug the air, but that is not a preferable way to bring a train to a stop. You need to bring it to a control stop, because putting a train into emergency can end up causing more problems than it fixes. That can cause derailments. We had one last January 22, up by Tehachapi. I did videos of that on my channel, and that's what happened. That train was starting to get away from them. The crew put the train in, it caused a big derailment.
Why don't we go to that video? So Henry, could you please go to his channel and we'll pull up whatever video you're talking about. Yeah, so what happened? Can you give us like the story behind this train, what was happening and why they tried to do an emergency brake?
It was my understanding that the crew had been having trouble with the air on that train, which is what controls the braking system, for some time. And when they went off the top of the hill there in Tehachapi, they didn't get very far out of town. This is last. This is the one that just happened. This one. What happened in this derailment? What happened in this one? This is the one this was January of 23. And what happened in that?
You're talking about January 22.
Of January 22, the one that went into emergency. Okay. Yeah, this one, a broken rail caused this.
Oh, okay. How does that happen? How do you get a broken rail without anyone?
My understanding is that they had a locomotive that kept losing power and causing the train to stall. And in my opinion, what they should have done was, the second time that they had trouble with it, they kept having trouble and backing it back down onto double track. And they should have brought another locomotive up to help it up the hill rather than keep on trying. But they ended up losing traction with the locomotive and what's called an engine burn or a rail burn. That weakened the structure of the rail, and when it was backing down the last time, the rail broke under the train and put the cars on the ground.
Oh, wow.
And all those cars were empty except for the tanks that went down the hill. And these cars are all still here. They still haven't cleaned this up.
No way. Okay,
yeah.
Why is that acceptable? Who's responsible? And isn't that considered littering? Because
that's big litter. No, this
in Arizona, I worked in a public defender's office, and in Arizona, one of my clients got charged with littering because he just stopped using his trailer home, and so he littered his trailer home. So how is that not? And he faced prison time for that. So I'm wondering how are the people here not responsible for littering?
For one thing, it's the railroad's property, but the train's out of the way. The equipment's out of the way. It's not causing problems, and it's going to upset train traffic to get that stuff out of there. They're going to have to foul the tracks to get that stuff pulled up out of there. And with the supply chain issues we're already having, nobody's going to make much noise about it. There's no messes. As I said, they're all empty cars. They're just laying there scattered down the side of that hill, and they'll get to it. It'll and it's it's in a remote area. I mean, Highway 58 is right across the creek from it, but you still can't access it unless you know where to go. And so it's not like people are up there climbing around on it or anything.
Okay. Yeah, because that would be a hazard. Do you have
There's
a
the
lot
case.
of? This is the video that you were talking about with the forced
That's correct.
stop that caused all sorts of issues.
And what
So
happened in that one? Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
What happened in this one was and again, my understanding, the train started getting away. It was picking up speed, and the crew weren't able to get it back under control. So they put the train into emergency. And this was about in the middle of the train where this happened. And when they did that, these cars were empty and they just started buckling up on that curve. And so that's what happened there. And there were, these were all empty. These are the ones here, the auto racks, ones that have cars in them. And then the tank cars were all LPG cars, liquefied petroleum gas, but they were all empty. And one of my I did about 4 videos. I got this one the day it happened, and I went back a few times, and I got a video of them venting the excess gas, burning it off before they actually they came in and scrapped all these cars, cut everything up, and hauled it off. And that's what they'll do with these. That's what they'll do with these other derailment too.
Is burning off gas a common thing when there's derailments?
If there's a like, this is LPG, it's just like, it's a clean burning gas. And what happened in Ohio is that is a different, as far as what they did to burn that off. I've never heard of anything like that, because I'm not saying it hasn't happened, but I've never heard of anything like that. It hasn't happened around here. And, burning off a chemical like that, that was obviously a really, really bad deal. And I'm not a hazmat guy, and so I don't know the ins and outs of whether that would have caused an explosion with that polymerization effect going on.
Right.
Or if it was going to blow up, would that have made things worse? I don't know. I just, that's one of the things. I made a little video on my channel about my opinion of that. And the gist of that entire video was, I don't know. And until the reports come out, and neither does anyone else.
Interesting. Is it harder to take care of a train once it's tipped, or once it's derailed, it's derailed? It doesn't matter if it's tipped or if it's still on its feet.
I'm sorry. I don't understand the question. What's that again?
So, like, in that video, in that train, the train is still on the wheels. Like, it hasn't tipped over. So does that make it easier to deal with, or does it not really matter once the train's derailed?
Oh, you mean like for cleanup purposes? It doesn't really matter.
For getting things back in.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Once they're scattered, they're scattered. These cars, and in most derailments where this kind of damage is done, those cars are written off. They bring scrappers in and just cut everything up and haul it off that way.
Interesting. Well, okay, do you have any what is like the major issues with train tracks? Is it trespassers messing with it? Is it the train deteriorating over time?
I can only speak for my corner of the world, and the maintenance on the Mojave sub and the Fresno sub, which are the 2 subdivisions, and the SEMA sub, which is railroads are put together on Union Pacific in regions, and regions are broken down into subdivisions. And the subdivisions that I worked on had excellent track maintenance. Even the recent, had a lot of people with the derailment in January say, oh, maybe it had something to do with the rain, but no, the rain, it didn't rain that much. And, but they take excellent care of this. They have track inspectors that go over their territories 7 days a week. And sometimes they have to put out what are called slow orders if they find a problem where for whatever reason, whether there's an issue with the track or the track structure, the road bed or something, and they'll put a slow order on there where a train, when they get to that, they will have to slow down from whatever the maximum authorized speed is to whatever the slow order is, whether it's 20 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, or whatever.
Well, speaking of regulations, ever since this Ohio incident, so many people have been like, well, it's Trump's fault because of the decrease in regulations. Has there been a decrease in
No,
regulation? Is it Trump's fault?
American railroads were deregulated by Jimmy Carter. That's how long
okay.
ago, that's how long ago they. And I've
America's
heard
worst
people say
president.
that Trump did this or Trump did that, but is to the best of my knowledge, no president in quite some time has signed any legislation that has, once you're deregulated, and you have the railroads are governed by, they are under the purview of the Federal Railroad Administration, and the Federal Railroad Administration has guidelines that we have to follow. Now, again, I'm a signal guy. I don't know, as far as operations, which is the train service, I don't know what all federal FRA guidelines they have to follow other than hours of service and things like that. But for, say, the signal department, they write the rules that tell us how often we have to test equipment, how it has to be tested, just step by step of how we do that. And I imagine that in operations, and I know that the maintenance of way, which is the people who take care of the track, we all fall under the FRA.
No matter the train size or the company size or the railway size or the type of train,
no matter what, everyone falls on. You have class 1, class 2 railroads. Class 1s are Union Pacific, BNSF, the big mainline freight ones. Then you have class 2 railroads like San Joaquin Valley Railroad here in the valley that operates the branch lines, and they do have different guidelines, but as far as, say, their signal equipment, their crossings and stuff, they have the exact same rules as we do as far as testing, when it has to be, how often it has to be done, and how it's done. And but again, I don't pretend to be an expert on trains. I tell people all the time in my videos, I'm not conversant with locomotive types or any of that. I know a lot of locomotive engineers, but it's not really something we talk much about. We play golf together and stuff, and I really don't discuss things unless I have a question that's going to pertain to one of my how things work videos. I didn't even know that we had AC and DC locomotives, and we've had AC.
Oh, that's cool. When did you figure that out?
One of my subscribers said, "Hey, why don't you do a deal on the difference between AC and DC locomotives?" And I'm like, "We have AC and DC locomotives." So I went down to the yard office and talked to one of my train buddies, and he took me out and showed me the differences and all that stuff. And I did a video about it, like I knew what I was talking about.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. You must be learning a lot about like the actual train stuff that you didn't know until after retirement.
Doing these videos, I've learned a lot of subscribers who are really into locomotives, especially young people. They know so much.
Speaking of your I want to actually have Henry pull up your channel so we could check it out. And I want to actually start asking you about your YouTube channel, about your process, what got you started and how it's going, because you've been so successful on the YouTube streets, as they call it in my stupid ass community. Yeah, so everybody should go subscribe to him. And how long did you say you've been doing this?
I started the channel in January of 2019 when I was still working, and I did some stuff. My channel, I originally intended it to just be a how things work channel, but people started saying, hey, why don't you show some trains? Go up to Tehachapi and shoot a train on the loop. So I started doing train stuff. And then my wife, we were driving somewhere, and I was telling her we were driving by some place. I don't remember. And I said, yeah, one time we were doing something in blah, blah, blah. And telling, she goes, you should be saying that stuff on your videos. You need to tell people about this. And I was like, people don't want to hear me bleed on about that. And so I started
But
doing
they
it.
do.
And, yeah, people seem to enjoy it. And I have a lot of stories about a lot of the places I shoot. And I always try to incorporate some of that into videos. If I'm at a location where something interesting happened or something funny or whatever, I try to incorporate some kind of a story about it.
That's amazing. How many places have you traveled in this YouTube venturing that you've been doing?
As far as just strictly to go shoot videos, I stay kind of in the region between Fresno and Palmdale, but I have taken road trips back to Colorado and last January. As a matter of fact, the last video that I shot of that derailment in January of 2022, I was on my way out of town on a road trip to go see my daughter in Denver that ended up being a very productive trip as far as my videos went. I got a lot of really cool footage and trains in different places. So anywhere I go, I shoot videos, even if it's not of trains, because I have a legitimate business that my channel is built around. So whenever I go on trips and shoot videos, I write the trips off.
Oh, great. Awesome. What a great new career for you, because you just retired 2 years ago. And so now you have this, and this is fun. Oh, wow.
And that is
Do you want to give a
this train right here. This one is at a place called Marcel, and that used to be this is just above the Tehachapi Loop. This right here is maybe 2 miles above the Tehachapi Loop. And
somebody just asked about that.
Yeah, it used to be its own siding, but they did a double track project, and I think they finished it in 2015 or 16. I wasn't working up on the mountain at the time, but they double tracked everything from Waylong is the name of the siding that used to be the Tehachapi Loop, and now everything is, hey, there's my wife's car. My truck was in the shop again. But
ooh, a nice car.
they double tracked everything from Waylong to Marcel back then, and so now it's just a stretch of double track that's about 5 miles long.
Wow.
And that is my buddy. That is Stephen Humphrey. And Stephen is from England. He came over and spent a couple of days hanging out and shooting. I've taken him to some of the out of the way places.
Has this YouTube experience been like a life-changing thing for your whole family? Like your whole family gets involved in making this fun project with you?
No, not really. My kids, none of my kids live at home anymore. None of them are interested in the railroad. But every once in a while, here I was in December, Jennifer took a day off and said, hey, let's go shoot some of your videos. So we drove up to Fresno and shot some videos and finished a video that I'd been working on for almost 3 years. Finished that. And I have one of the rail grinding train working at night, and Jennifer had some good ideas about pacing that train, and that was in this area, pacing that train with me in the back of the pickup and her driving alongside the tracks, and that one turned out really well.
Very cool. Well, my friend Nasty Nathaniel, who is a YouTuber as well, he wants me to ask you about the old F unit trains. Old F unit trains. If I say that too fast, it sounds like I'm saying something not very nice.
I know. I'm assuming he's talking about the old F-type locomotives. And again, I'm not. Okay. I mean, I think that if that's what he's talking about, I think those are probably some of the coolest looking locomotives ever built, diesel electrics. But I really don't know a lot about them other than that. I think they're cool. By the time I went to work in 1979, and they weren't using those locomotives any longer around here anyway.
Interesting. Can only so with the AC/DC trains, can they not go on the same track then?
No, that's just the way that the way diesel electrics work is they have a diesel engine that runs generators that create electricity for the traction motors on the axles.
Mm,
And
okay.
so the older ones were had DC motors on them, and the newer ones have AC
That makes
motors on
sense.
them.
So can any train go on any railway? Are they all made like the same
As long as the
measurements?
gauge is the distance between the rails, and as long as the gauge is right, they can be on. I would say if you took say like a locomotive from an strictly electrified and didn't have any, that uses the overhead wires, they could pull those on rail like this, but it couldn't operate on rail like this because it wouldn't have the electricity to do it. But
Oh,
as long as the
interesting.
gauge is right. This is the fourth crossing of Tehachapi Creek. This is at the east end, or in UP parlance, the south end of a siding called Woodford. This is near Keene, California, 10 miles west of Tehachapi. And that bridge there is the fourth crossing. In 1932, they had a flash flood that destroyed all of the crossings of Tehachapi, all 7 crossings of Tehachapi Creek. And that is the biggest bridge there. That it was a trestle at the time. It wasn't a deck bridge like this. And all the debris built up behind that. And when that broke loose, it wiped out the parts of the community of Keene. I don't remember exactly. I don't think they ever figured out exactly how many people died in that, but took a couple of locomotives one off into the creek and lifted one up. These are steam engines. Lifted it up and turned it sideways and washed the crew out. 3 crew, 2 of them perished. Was a really big deal.
That is a big deal. That's really scary. So when they're planning to make do they make new railways, or are there just enough railways so they don't make new ones? And if they do make new ones, are they extra cautious of all of the past incidents and like try not to go over waterways, or is it
Generally,
impossible
what
to
they
avoid?
do anymore, and for quite some time now, is they don't generally do new main lines anymore. They just upgrade existing ones, and they might move them. After that 1932 flood, where some trestles were wiped out down below over Caliente Creek, they just took the entire railroad and moved it up onto high ground. And originally there were 17 tunnels on the Tehachapi, and when they moved all that stuff up to high ground, they had to make another tunnel. It was before you got to tunnel 1, so they called it tunnel half. And so they will move and upgrade. I don't know when the last main line or bypass was done in America. That's something I have. Let's see if you can. I have a lot of railroad history books.
Yes, I see that.
And
A lot of books.
I know that some of the stuff was done. A lot of the line changes, big line changes and stuff were done in the early part of the 20th century. And I know that they've done some more up in New Mexico and northeastern Arizona, but I don't know when those were done. But generally, they just take what's there and upgrade it. This video is in the Bakersfield Yard.
Oh, nice.
And
So Imami wants to know, so you mentioned earlier that there's federal regulation, but who's monitoring the safety? They want to know if it's state or rail or any other organization.
As far as safety is kind of a multifaceted word on the railroads, multifaceted word everywhere, really. But the railroads, the FRA has federal authority, and then in California, we have the California Public Utilities Commission, who has state authority to enact or pursue whatever regulations they have in place. But as far as safety goes, it's like the testing that the FRA requires us to do. The railroad is generally more stringent than that. Those are the FRA and PUC, the government regulations are the more lenient generally. The railroads are usually more stringent. They enact their own. They want things done. Say if the FRA in a signal situation has 5 steps they want you to take in testing a piece of equipment, the railroad might have 8 or 10 steps that you have to do.
Okay, I see. So there's like a minimum, and then
the railroads are generally more stringent, and the reason for that is it is so much more efficient and economic for the railroads to make sure their equipment's working correctly than it is to. I mean, you could over maintain a railroad for 20 years and not spend the money one derailment will cost you. So.
I hear you. That's crazy. It's crazy then that it seems like they lack on maintenance. Like in that video that I showed you earlier with the rickety track, I'm sure you've seen other rickety tracks as well. Why would you even take the risk? Why do we see so many trail derailments if it's actually cheaper to just maintain the railways as opposed to fixing them?
Because most derailments aren't caused by bad track.
Okay. What?
Well, thank you. Thanks to your Roy Reynolds. Thank you for that information. Is that a Metro thing, or is that a mainline freight because it's going to the airport? But
I don't know. Let's wait for him to respond. And he also had Coco to Orlando is the new portion. He wanted to add that as well.
I don't know anything about Florida either, other than Disneyland's there, Disney World's there.
Yeah, that is true. And I shall be there soon, moving down there. So,
But you asked a question that I interrupted. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just wondering about
it's
why
like
not maintain.
The footage that you showed that's not a main line, and it's probably not even operated by one of the major railroads. We have a few branch lines here that go out of Bakersfield, and one of them, which is called the Button Willow branch, which I just did a video on recently, was in terrible shape, but it didn't look anything like that. But they came through, and even when Southern Pacific still owned that branch, they did some pretty extensive upgrades on it through town where most of their business was. And then after San Joaquin Valley took over operation of that, they have done bits and pieces. They just did a big tie project where they replaced a bunch of ties. And so as far as that footage that you saw, I've never seen anything in that bad a shape, but I have the luxury, as far as a railroader, of living in a place where we don't have much weather. It's relatively dry here all the time. We don't get swampy conditions like you might have seen there, and forests and stuff like that. It's pretty easy to maintain the railroads where we are, even the branch lines. So I guess I would assume that somewhere like that would be almost a risk versus reward thing. Should we invest, $5 million in a rail and tie project, or just hope that we can make $1 million running it like this? But there again, that is total speculation on my part.
Do you have different regulations for passenger trains versus freight trains, and different? Yes. And can you use the same tracks for passengers?
Oh, yeah.
Freight?
Amtrak. The only track that Amtrak actually owns is up in the Northeast Corridor. I don't know exactly where, but out here, going across the country, Amtrak runs on UP, BNSF. Around here, it runs on BNSF, on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe. There is no passenger service between Bakersfield and Los Angeles over the Tehachapi. If you want to come down, if you come down from the Bay Area or from Sacramento down the valley to Bakersfield, you would have to get on an Amtrak bus to go to Los Angeles.
So if there's an issue and a bunch of people get injured on an Amtrak train, then who's responsible? The Amtrak or the railway?
It would depend on what caused the derailment. If it was a track problem or a signal problem, it would be the railroad. If it was train handling, it would be Amtrak.
Interesting. And you see more issues with derailments with cargo than people, right? Have you ever seen a train derailment with people?
Well, freight trains are bigger, heavier, a lot more things to go wrong. And there are a lot more. They run a lot more freight trains than they do passenger trains.
Why do we not have very many like Europe has an extensive train system. Most first world countries have a very extensive passenger train system. Why does America seem to be lacking?
California is bigger than half of Europe. It's one of the things people don't seem to understand is how big the United States is. And we have an extensive interstate system. I'm not opposed to high-speed rail. I'm opposed to the one they're working on now in California because it's a huge waste of money. Californians aren't ready to give their cars. The time will come. That's so funny
because my dad ran for Congress in California, and his only platform was stop that effing train. He lost, but Loretta Sanchez won. But crazy how much money they're spending on that effing train.
I knew that they were selling Arnold Schwarzenegger a bill of goods when they were first talking about it. And I was thinking, I hope this doesn't pass. Like I said, I'm not opposed to the technology, and the time will come for it, but it's not right now. And Gavin Newsom has canceled construction on everything that isn't already under construction, and that's only from Bakersfield to Madera. And you know how many people need to go from Bakersfield to Madera? Nobody.
Wait, can you I always suck at telling the story. You'll probably know it better. So the original plans for that stupid California train, wasn't it from like San Diego to San Francisco with LA and like
San Diego to the Bay Area? I think San Jose was originally was the original terminus for it or something like that.
And then what happened? It just kept getting pushed inland for whatever reason, and now it's between
First of all, we don't know how to build high-speed rail in America. We've never done it. We know nothing about it. So we had to bring people from Europe to tell us how to do it, show us how to do it. And a lot of these jobs they say it created went to people who weren't even from America. America doesn't know how to get the government. They're incapable of getting the government involved in anything that doesn't turn into a big fiasco, a financial boondoggle like this.
Oh, I know.
It's just absolutely ridiculous. I think the entire project was originally supposed to be like 11 or 12 billion dollars or something like that. They're already at like 20, and they haven't even laid a rail yet. They don't even have all the bridges done. It's ridiculous. But, yeah. Oh, this is a video of how they change rail. This is the.
What do you mean change rail? Oh, like they take out a rail and put in a new one?
Take out the old rail and put a new one in. And this is.
So if you have. Are there any train tracks that have a train coming on it like every hour? And if so, how do you do maintenance on those types of tracks?
This is one of the busiest corridors for freight in the United States going over to Tehachapi. And the reason for that is you have two railroads using one line. And the average, this is sometimes more, sometimes less, is around 30 trains every 24 hours. And in a situation like this, what they're doing here is they're laying rail on the main line. You see the track over on the other side is the siding, and they they were able to run the trains through the siding to go around the construction. And many places are double track, and they can do the same thing there, work on one track and use the other track to run trains. If they're on single track, then they have to do it differently. They put out what's called a maintenance window, where the day before they get permission to take the track out of service. The dispatchers, the companies will hold all their trains wherever they're going to hold them. These guys will work on the tracks. They'll give them usually 8 or 10 hours, and they'll do their work and then cut the trains loose at the end of the day.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. Have you had any issues with trespassers on train tracks and how that's affected maintenance?
It's around here. No, it's not a real big deal. Obviously they had all the theft issues in Los Angeles, and that became a problem. Obviously, those are obviously trespassers. But as far as around here, it's not really a big issue. I get accused of trespassing a lot on my own channel. People say, "Aren't you trespassing?" Union Pacific knows I'm out there.
Do they?
Oh, yes.
You ask for permission first, or they know you, and so
they know who I am.
Oh.
They know I was.
Cool.
Let me tell you an interesting story. When I was still working, I started shooting videos and started my channel. And my director called me in one day and said, "Hey, we don't have a problem with your content, but you can't be doing this stuff while you're on the clock. You're not getting paid to make videos." And so and at that point, I'd already shot quite a few videos, and I knew I was retiring, so I still shot some more. And I have a playlist on my channel called the Forbidden Video Files, which are videos I shot while I was working and I released after I retired.
That's cute.
I've told people, I have one of my early videos after I retired was, I have another playlist called My Thoughts on Railroading, and about, my relationship with the railroad. I have no axes to grind with Union Pacific. Union Pacific provided me with a great career. I have a great pension. I'm not out there doing hit pieces or trying to make the railroad look bad. They know I'm not going to get in the way. These people know who I am, the people out in the field, and they know I'm not going to get in the way. And whenever I post a video, I was going to say, when I post a video, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, if I were to do the same thing, would they not let me? Would I be a trespasser?
If you went to a location like this, they would probably ask you to leave.
Interesting. That's why you get all the great exclusive video that you get.
Yeah, when I get there, I go up to the guy who's in charge and tell him, "Hey, I'm here. I'm going to be over there shooting videos. Is that okay?" And I actually had, when they were the fourth crossing of Tehachapi Creek, they replaced the deck of that bridge about I can't remember how long ago it was now. But I was up there above shooting, and the guy who was in charge of that drove up there and asked me if I wouldn't post the video of them actually doing the work on the bridge. And I said, okay. They don't give me any grief.
Okay.
I'm not going to go, "Hey, I'm not on railroad property. I can shoot whatever I want." I'm not going to do that to them. If they don't want me to shoot it, I won't.
Have you ever been asked to leave? Like, "Oh, sorry, we just, we can't have you here. Can you please leave?"
No. Even that guy said, "If you want to shoot the crane working over here and these guys working over there, that's fine. Just don't shoot the work on the deck."
Very cool. Very cool. That is awesome. That's great that they work with you. It must be because of your experience, but very interesting.
It's like I said, they know I'm not out there to, I see videos where people are just trying to make railroads look bad, and that's not my aim. I don't have
really. Like, what do you mean? Why would anyone try to make the railway look bad?
I've seen people post videos without context. Say, "Look at this train. He went right there," and it was like, there was no protection. Well, the thing was that there was a maintainer there, and he had the crossing taken out of service and was flagging the crossing, and the train went through under specific crossing orders. But people will do things like that. And sometimes I don't know if they're doing it to make the railroad look bad or if they're just doing it to get views. And but either way, you know, it
That's
doesn't look
another
good.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Our
it
community is full
doesn't
of
look
these things.
good.
Yeah, our community is full of these things called First Amendment auditors. Like the idea is to audit our government, but a lot of times they just do these really invasive videos in front of the cops, like putting their phone in front of the cop's face.
Yeah.
And it's like, are you doing that to help make our cops better? Or are you trying to just get clicks and views?
Yep.
So clicks and views.
Exactly.
Clicks and views.
I won't engage in that.
Yeah, yes, but I mean, you still grow anyway. That's probably because you don't do that sort of BS, honestly.
I keep politics off the channel. I don't.
Someone asked earlier if you voted for Trump. So.
Yes, I did.
Okay, you could say, yeah, so did I.
But I don't involve politics in the channel. I have another channel that's my rant channel, and it's only got a few hundred subscribers. But if I feel like pissing and moaning about something, I go over there and do it. But,
let's check. Wait, can we pull it up? Do you know? Does Henry know the name of it?
It's called Moto Poet 59.
Moto Poet 59. So Henry will be looking for that in the back. And is there any common misconception or anything that people don't know about trains that you want to leave us on imparting words on?
I guess one of them, in the light of things that have been happening recently in all the news, is that train derailments are very, very common, and they always have been. I have a book here that is an entire book of derailments before 1950. And
wow.
It's just, trains are big, they're heavy. They used to do a lot of questionable practices back in the steam days, and before the advent of modern signal systems, there were just lots of things. And since the proliferation of social media, people always, just like with any other event, if something happens on the railroad and somebody's got a phone out, it becomes news. Most derailments happen in remote areas. They don't generally do a lot of damage to anything other than the railroad itself, so they don't become news. So, when you hear about derailments, you generally only hear about the ones that got covered.
Henry's having a hard time finding your other channel.
It's called Moto Poet, MOTOPOET 59.
Moto Poet. Are you a poet, or do you not even know it? Can we hear some? Can you spit some bars for us right now?
I've actually had a couple of poems published.
Oh, let's hear some. Go ahead, whip out one of your poems. We would love to hear it.
What's that?
We would love to hear one of your poems. Are these recordings of your poems?
No, I don't have any. No, that's my rant channel. I go and complain about things.
Do you have a poem on trains that you could read for us to close this out?
Let me see.
That would be such a great way to end this stream.
This is not the complete works. I have 2 other binders full of stuff, but
oh wow.
Magoo is nobody calls me that anymore, but that's what I was known as in the old days.
I love it. I love it. Well, Queen Madagirl is a new fan because she's a Trump supporter. I know that for a fact. Hey, Queenie, it's nice to see you here, girl.
I wrote this in, 1981. And this is about work more than the railroad. It's kind of, Shovels, bootlegs, track wires, ties, cases, rails, foreman who tell lies. Signals, track cars, gates are all down, ditches, caliche, working downtown. CTC, gaffs, and overhead wire, gang trucks, white hats, and the engine's on fire. Pole lines, relays, signalman schools. Union rep says don't break the rules. Backgrounds, lenses, a 15-watt light. Bonding hammers, maintainers working all night. Cable plow cutovers, 12-hour days. Working out in Phelan and a 6% raise. Track gangs, signalmans, electricians too. Drive out to high volt because there's nothing to do. Backhoes, stake beds, inspectors' vans. Splices, pull boxes, and too many hands. White trucks, sensors, resistance sums. Weekends, holidays, payday comes.
I loved that. We're good. Henry, clip it. That is its own video. Just that one poem is its own video for our channel. I absolutely love that. That was great. I love that. That was
I want to say one more thing. That I don't know what our time constraints are here.
We have as much time as you want.
Oh, okay. I thought you said you wanted something, you were on to leave. One of the other things that people should know, and a misconception that I know some people have, I can't say a lot, is where railroad crossings are concerned, where roadways, crossings at grade, where roads cross the tracks and the gates and all that stuff. Never, ever, for any reason, stop on the tracks. If you even think that you might get stuck on the tracks, that's what those two white lines are before you get to the tracks. Stop there. That way you're clear of the gates. The gates don't have sensors on them. If they come down, they'll come down on top of your car. They're not real heavy, but if you got your nice little BMW or your big fancy pickup or something, they'll scratch your paint and you're responsible. You can't go complain to the railroad because you're more likely to just get a ticket for having been out there. If you cross the tracks or that white line, once the lights start flashing, even if the gates haven't started down yet, that's the same thing as running a red light. Carries the same, as a matter of fact, I think the fine is actually more. And in California, they are not giving, used to you could go to court and they'd give you a break on your fine, but that's not the case anymore. You're going to have to pay. Oh my goodness gracious.
Wait, where was the thing? Where was the thing?
Not all crossings have gates. Some of them just have flashers. Some of them only have crossbar, the little X thing.
Wait, can we rewatch that? Let's rewatch that. What? This is literally just a stop. That was just a stop sign. Oh my god! I see the flashers, but they're not on.
Yeah, it doesn't look like they are. And that's another thing. Never assume that everything is going to work correctly. Sometimes there's a reason the gates don't go down. Sometimes they're being held up.
How do you not hear that train coming?
They probably do. People don't pay attention.
Shut up. How are you still alive, my dear sir? Oh gosh, no, don't let it happen. Stop it. Get out of there. Get out of there.
And that's a crossing. The gates that he went through, some crossings have what are called exit gates. And it depends on how the crossing is. Oh, that guy just went through one of them. But I've seen this one.
Oh my goodness.
Never. The first rule in the rule book of all railroads is you must work safely. Working safely, your job counts on you working safely. If you don't work safely, you're going to get fired. They're all worded a little differently, but that's the gist of it. The second rule is expect the movement of trains on any track at any time in either direction. Never.
Did you see that video of that guy who the police officer arrests the girl, puts her in the back of the car, keeps his police cruiser on the tracks, and then the car gets hit with the defendant in the back seat?
No, I never saw that.
Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't.
That one blew my mind. That blew my mind.
I did a video called How Traffic Control Works. at a crossing, where if you have a crossing where there's a traffic light at an intersection that's close to the tracks, when the crossing gets activated, and in higher speed railroading, they have what's called, I can't remember what it's called now, advanced preemption, where the intersection will start doing its thing even long before the gates come down. But what happens is that when the crossing is activated, the traffic system, our system, notifies their system that the crossing is activated. It will clear the lights and clear the traffic off a crossing. And then the lights will start doing flashing red, or however they're set up to work while the train goes by. And a lot of people see that happening, but that has caused problems where, in the event that for some reason the traffic control system didn't work correctly, the intersection didn't get cleared out and cars got hit because they were stuck behind a red light. So never, ever stop on the tracks, and never, ever, for any reason, ever go around gates that are down unless you're instructed to do so by a railroad employee or a law enforcement officer. That's another expensive fine, but the money is irrelevant. If the gates are down, they're generally down for a reason. And I know sometimes you can see a mile down the tracks either way. Sometimes things go wrong. The system breaks. And I always tell people, if the gates are down and there's no train, you can cuss we signalmen. But if the gates are down and there is a train, thank us, because we're the reason those are working right. When you see people out there working on the crossings, trying to get things fixed, and the gates are down, don't flip them off and yell at them and honk your horn at them. They're not out there trying to waste their time. We're trying to get things going as quickly as we can. Sometimes there are multiple problems. Sometimes there's vandalism. There's so many reasons a crossing can be malfunctioning, and we're out there trying to get the job done. And the more you yell at us, the slower we're going to work.
Wow. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, so you guys get a lot of disdain from people who just
my gosh. That's incredible. Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've
people
seen?
Just like yelling at things, I guess.
Imagine yelling at a train.
I have literally, and that's another thing. There are certain municipalities who have a local code about trains blocking crossings, but it's almost impossible to enforce. There is no federal code. There's nothing about how long a train can block a crossing. It just doesn't exist. And
oh, really? What's the longest train that you can have then, and how long? So you could have like a train that takes 2 hours to.
Well, the longest train in existence in America, even going really slow, would probably take, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes to go by. They're not that long.
Oh, really?
The problem is sometimes trains stop.
Sometimes
trains stop in crossings for whatever reason. Maybe they're doing some switching. Maybe they're broke, something's wrong with them, or they're doing a crew change. And sometimes the crossings get blocked, and it's just the way it is. Everybody who's on a highway anywhere needs to understand that in percent of the time, the railroad was the right of way. And a railroad could actually close a street without the city's permission. They could do that. They won't do that, but it's their property. They're the ones that allow anyone to cross the tracks. And they try, but
wow.
Yeah. Once you're within, and it depends on where you are, but once you're within a certain distance of the tracks, you're on railroad property. And
so usually, even when the tracks go through the road, and like that road is clearly like a state road, that's still railroad property.
So the tracks doesn't go. Tracks don't go through the road.
I think you may either I cut out or
they don't like that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think you may have cut out. Could you repeat what you just said? Either I cut out or you cut out internet wise. If you could repeat
I'm just
what you
just saying
said.
that whenever you are on railroad tracks, you're on private property, whether you're on a paved city street or what. The railroad gives a city or a municipality or whatever permission to cross their tracks. And the railroad doesn't like crossings. If it was up to them, there wouldn't be any. And their crossings are their biggest liability. That is where most accidents occur, is at crossings, if they hit cars. And the railroads hit a lot more pedestrians than they do cars, and they hit a lot of cars.
Do they hit pedestrians mostly at crossings, or mostly when it's like a trespasser trying to do train hopping? Is that a major issue? People just trying to get across the tracks in weird places, I shouldn't say weird places. Just before I retired, we were up in Fresno, and a guy tried to run across the tracks before one of the little local trains came and was struck and killed. And talking about a train that was like 10 cars long, it would have been by him in 10 seconds. But he tried to run across the track and was killed. And that happens a lot. It's a lot of people get drunk, pass out on tracks. Sometimes crews will say they saw the person trip and fall and get struck by trains. It's become chic for young people to take selfies on tracks and to have portraits done on tracks. Don't do that. Don't do that unless you have. Have you seen anyone get hit from something like that? Have you heard of anyone getting hit from something like that?
Yeah. It happens. It happens a lot in the Los Angeles area, where pedestrians walking the age of cell phones and earbuds. People walk down the middle of the tracks like it's a road, and they get hit by the Metrolink and by not so much by the freight roads, but the Metrolink. It's a problem. And the railroad has taken to building pretty secure fences along their right of way around towns to keep that from happening. Don't mess around on the tracks. Don't take pictures on the tracks. Don't ride your bicycle or your motorcycle down the tracks unless just don't do it. Don't do it.
Has there been like a story in which you could see like the photos, like the photo ops that they got versus the dead person who got hit right after those photos were taken? Have you seen anything like that?
I've seen a couple of things where it had somebody with a selfie, and say the train hit them, but there was no footage of them hitting them. And again, I don't know if that really happened or if somebody's just trying to get views.
Don't you hate the internet? Hate/love the internet. It's like so much knowledge, so little truth.
Yeah.
So it's really funny. I just always anticipated train hopping would be where the majority of injuries occur, as opposed to carelessness crossing. But I guess it is.
And that was probably a time when that was true, but you just don't see a lot of people hopping trains anymore. And generally, when I first went to work here and up into the mid '80s, it was common to see if there was an open door on a boxcar, there was generally someone in it. But anymore, that's really not the case. You got these people who call themselves hobos now, but they got cell phones and laptops and hotspots and all this stuff, and they can
all paid for by the taxpayer.
They're in their channels. They have YouTube channels that make a lot more money than mine does.
Yes, I do this.
You're not a hobo. You're a YouTube creator.
During COVID, I was in this group online, and I found out one of them was homeless. He chose to be homeless, had a laptop, had internet connection at all times, had a cell phone, always eating out, had nice clothing. I'm like, damn.
I always say there's a difference between being homeless and just not wanting to work.
So true. That is so true. Well, let's pull your channel up one last time. I did ask Henry. I'm not sure if he could find it. He'll tell us in a sec. I did want to pull up that video for you of that girl who is getting arrested, who gets put in the back of the police car, because it's just such a great video to react to. I don't know. Hold on. Let me see. Let me check.
Do you know if the girl was killed?
I don't think it will get the video. He's worried about playing it because he's worried that it'll get our video flagged. But I don't
know if I want to see
I
it.
don't remember.
I don't like seeing people get hurt.
But you don't like seeing it? I mean, it's such a interesting. I don't know why. Why do people like to see that? Just the reaction. It was just so crazy that this police officer thought it was smart.
People like carnage,
literally
no
park
matter what
his
it
car.
is. It's like I said with my,
Very true.
my derailment videos. They're awesome. They would have really grown my channel, but I don't like saying that.
Yeah, no, I hear
People like
you.
carnage.
It's
Blood cells.
people like carnage, people like drama, blood cells. I hear you. Well, you've been absolutely fantastic, and I hope that we
to
could
say,
do
I don't
maybe.
know if you saw. I heard you mention during COVID. I got COVID in 2020, almost died, and I have a playlist on my channel where I did some videos, and the ones I did in the hospital, I don't even remember doing, I had to.
Oh my God, you were that hilarious.
Shoot the videos, edit them, put them on and I don't remember any of it. I was so sick, but
oh my God, I can't even imagine.
A lot of people thought that COVID wasn't real. I'm here to tell you it was. I still think the government overreacted because of it, but yeah, it was real.
No. Well, if you ever want to come on for a political stream, because I know you don't do politics on your channel, I personally love politics, and my haters in chat are a bunch of libtards, and they know I love politics. So if you ever want to come back, make sure to let me know. But anyway, thank you so much to everybody who has been here. You have been amazing. I love you all. Make sure to check out Mark Clay McGowan on YouTube. And yeah, give him a like and subscribe. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren. It was nice to